Good morning. It is Friday, November 16th, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So this is the show that's for the butchers, the bakers, the candlestick makers, not for the professionals, the attorneys, the professors, and doctors. So this is also a show for those of you that may like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity et al., but you feel that somehow got this vague feeling that it could be better. They're not doing as good as they should be. So if that's the way you look at things as far as Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity is concerned, this is the show for you. Now, this morning, I was listening to, it was not Hugh Hewitt, but Glenn Beck. There we go. A few minutes ago, Glenn Beck, and he had on Bill O'Reilly, and they were saying that the decision had been made by a judge in the CNN case. Jim Acosta he had his press credentials suspended for a week by White House authorities, ostensibly by the president, because of misbehavior on his part. So CNN sued and said that he tried to argue he has some kind of constitutional right to misbehave or whatever. And apparently the judge took their side. So now the immediate response was from Bill O'Reilly was rather cold and very clinical. He was like, well, let's see, it'll be interesting to see whether or not the White House appeals this. Okay. And then they further went on to discuss the decision and refer to it in terms like absurd, ridiculous. Well, what they didn't do, and they should have done, is use the W word, assuming that they looked at this decision and concluded that the judge ruled incorrectly. Then they should have said this decision was wrong. But they didn't do that. They didn't use the R word. They didn't use the W word. And so at the end of this little discussion, you're left with wondering, well, what's the point here? Do you guys, are you supporting this decision? Or are you opposing it? Okay. If they come out and they say it's wrong, well, then we know. And you explain why. There's also an issue of, and this is again, the reason that these folks are doing things this way is because they've been influenced by the left. This is the way the left likes to do things. This is the kind of world that the left wants to shape up. No judgments allowed. You're not allowed to say what's right. You're not allowed to say what's wrong. Okay, you're only allowed to describe things and make predictions. You'll hear a lot of that in interviews. Well, what do you predict is going to happen? It doesn't matter. The question is not what will happen, but what should happen. So also the thing with predictions is that it implies that nobody has any free will, that things are happen because they're destined to happen, because there's some kind of fate or deterministic process going on. Not true. People have free will. And they should base their free will on doing what is right and avoiding doing what is wrong. So again, this is what they should have done here. Bill O'Reilly and Glenn Beck is come out and say this decision was wrong and this is why it was wrong. Now, you might think to yourself, but why would a judge, somebody that he's a lawyer, he's got the right credentials, he's got the right education, he's got the right temperament, to become a judge. He may have been elected by the people, but ostensibly he's gotten a recommendation from the Bar Association. Bar Association says, hey, he's a swell guy, he knows what he's talking about, he's shrewd, all that smart and all that stuff. So, yes, he's qualified to be on the bench. So here's a guy that's qualified to be on the bench, knows what he's doing, what he's talking about, but he's wrong. How can that be? How can that be? Simple. Assuming that we're talking about a judge that is on the left, then you realize that the left doesn't approach the world from the standpoint of right and wrong. Remember, they're judgment free. So what do they do instead is they look at the world in terms of power. And as far as they're concerned, power is neutral. Some people have it, some people don't. I have it now, you have it tomorrow, that kind of thing. It's very fluid and moving and whatnot. So the judge that's lefty, when you bring him a case, when CNN came to court and brought this case, and the federal government brought their attorneys, and these two attorneys are standing in front of the judge making their case, the judge is not looking at this from a right and wrong standpoint. The judge is looking at this from a power standpoint. The judge is asking himself not who's right here, but who should win. Those are two completely different ways of looking at things. Okay? So you can, because if you're looking at this in terms of who should win, well, do I like Donald Trump? No, I don't. I don't like Donald Trump, and no, he shouldn't win. Another way of putting it that maybe makes it a little bit more clear is, let's take Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was a serial killer. Ted Bundy comes to you and says 2 + 2 = 4. Is he right? Yes. Should he win? Should he be able to continue to kill people? Just by the fact that you say that he's right, does that mean you're endorsing this man? No. The two issues are completely separate. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day, analog clock. Digital clock's right only once. But, and even a digital clock's right once a day. And it's got nothing to do with the value of the clock itself. The clock itself is technically worthless. But once a day, it's right. It is correct. And what we're also dealing with here, because fundamentally the struggle between left and right is one of reality. Do we acknowledge reality? I.e., do we acknowledge universals? So, and that's fundamentally what it's about. Now, the conservatives are pro-reality. We acknowledge reality. We are realistic. The left is idealistic. They're not interested in reality. They're interested in achieving an ideal, and it can't be done in reality. So, and so that's where they get into undermining and subverting reality, and this is one of those cases. And the way they do it is by pretending everything in life is an issue of power. Pretending. They don't actually believe it. They pretend. They use it as this pretense, this conceit, as a tool or technique. So, again, the judge should have ruled, if Bill O'Reilly and Glenn Beck were doing their job as conservatives, then the judge should have ruled another way, and Bill O'Reilly and Glenn Beck should have explained to the audience why he should have ruled another way as a matter of reality, and then further explain to the audience why he ruled the way he did was because the judge looks at things in terms of power and in terms of who should win, in terms of winning and losing instead of right and wrong. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the Ayn Rand Lexicon, and then from a little bit about narcissists when I come back. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back. And so today's Ayn Rand lexicon, there's an entry called Contingent Truth. And then it says C, Analytic Synthetic Dichotomy. Contingent truth is what the left invented because instead of dealing with true or false, they can't deal with that or don't want to deal with that. So what they do is subvert truth by creating what they call contingent and necessary truths. No such thing. It's true or it's false. That's all there is to it. But anyway, so later on when we get into the S's, she's going to go ahead and deal with this particular issue, and that ought to be good. So the concept of the day is contracts. In a free society, men are not forced to deal with each other. They do so only by voluntary agreement and, when a time element is involved, by contract. If a contract is broken by the arbitrary decision of one man, it may cause a disastrous financial injury to the other. This leads to one of the most important and most complex functions of the government, to the function of an arbiter who settles disputes among men according to objective laws. A unilateral breach of contract involves an indirect use of physical force. It consists, in essence, of one man receiving the material values, goods, or services of another, then refusing to pay for them, and thus keeping them by force, by mere physical possession, not by right, i.e., keeping them without the consent of the owner. In a free society, the rights of any group are derived from the rights of its members through their voluntary, individual choice and contractual agreement, and are merely the application of these individual rights to a specific undertaking. Every legitimate group undertaking is based on the participants' right of free association and free trade. By legitimate, I mean non-criminal and freely formed. That is, a group which no one was forced to join. For instance, the right of an industrial concern to engage in business is derived from the right of its owners to invest their money in a productive venture, from their right to hire employees, from the right of the employees to sell their services, from the right of all those involved to produce and to sell their products, from the right of the customers to buy or not to buy those products. Every link of this complex chain of contractual relationships rests on individual rights, individual choices, individual agreements. Every agreement is delimited, specified, and subject to certain conditions. That is, dependent upon a mutual trade to mutual benefit. And that was the concept of the day, contract. Excellent stuff. The Ayn Rand lexicon, one of the books that I highly recommend that people read. If you don't want to get into Ayn Rand's nonfiction works, because I recommend her nonfiction works over her fiction. I wouldn't bother with The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged and all that stuff. You want to really get into it, look at her nonfiction works. The Romantic Manifesto and Philosophy, Who Needs It, for the New Intellectual, etc., etc. Those are the ones that really spell out for you what she's about, and also just where she really is good at many times describing reality and explaining things in terms that are easy to understand. It's a great place to start. So the Ayn Rand lexicon is an excellent book to read if you don't want to get into her other books. You just want to, it's kind of a dictionary or a glossary of the important concepts that she uses. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from a book that deals with narcissism and gaslighting. Thank you very much, and welcome back. Let's see what we got here. All right, let's try that again. The name of the book is called In Sheep's Clothing, and basically they're dealing with talking about how to recognize and deal with people that are narcissistic and more specifically gaslighting. So many of the people that you're going to deal with on the left are just that. Tammy Bruce has recognized it and recognized that a lot of the movements that she used to like and want to be part of have become nothing more than support for narcissism. And the whole idea seems to be to create narcissism. Look at the guy in Holland that has arbitrarily decided that he doesn't want to be 68 years old. He wants to be 49, and so he's going to sue the government so that he can have identification to that effect. So that, in other words, he can commit government-sanctioned fraud. Nothing more narcissistic. And one of the reasons that he lists for wanting to do this is because it's harder to meet chicks when you're 68 than when you're 49. So there you go. How about that for some narcissism? So when we left this off, he was talking about two important types of aggression, overt and covert. And so now we're in the section titled Covert and Passive Aggression. I often hear people say someone is being passive-aggressive when they're really trying to describe covertly aggressive behavior. Covert and passive aggression are both indirect ways to aggress, but they're most definitely not the same thing. Passive aggression is, as the term implies, aggressing through passivity. Examples of passive aggression are playing the game of emotional get-back with someone by resisting cooperation with them, giving them the silent treatment, pouting or whining, not so accidentally forgetting something they wanted you to do because you're angry and didn't really feel like obliging them, etc. In contrast, covert aggression is very active, albeit veiled aggression. When someone is being covertly aggressive, they're using calculating, underhanded means to get what they want or manipulate the response of others while keeping their aggressive intentions undercover. And I think that's an excellent description. Let's see, the covert aggression excellently describes the left. Especially this is the last part of the paragraph. When someone is being covertly aggressive, they're using calculated, underhanded means to get what they want or manipulate the response of others while keeping their aggressive intentions under cover. Back to the book. Next section, acts of covert aggression versus covert aggressive personalities. Most of us have engaged in some sort of covertly aggressive behavior from time to time, but that doesn't necessarily make someone a covert aggressive or manipulative personality. An individual's personality can be defined by the way he or she habitually perceives, relates to, and interacts with others and the world at large. It's the distinctive interactive style or relatively ingrained way a person prefers to deal with a wide variety of situations and to get the things they want in life. Certain personalities can be ever so ruthless in their interpersonal conduct while concealing their aggressive character or perhaps even projecting a convincing superficial charm. These covert aggressive personalities can have their way with you and look good in the process. They vary in their degree of ruthlessness and character pathology. But because the more extreme examples can teach us much about the process of manipulation in general, this book will pay special attention to some of the more seriously disturbed covert aggressive personalities. So when I get back to this book again next week, the next section is called The Process of Victimization. And let's see, it is called In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People. So, and I got a copy of this on Amazon. So, but this, that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, I thank you very much for listening and have a great day.